When I inherited my grandparents' $900,000 estate, I quietly moved it into a trust just in case. Last week, my brother showed up with Mom, grinning. We had the house signed into my name. "You're out by Friday." I just smiled and said, "You really think I'd let that happen?" 2 days later, they returned with movers and froze when they saw who was standing on the porch holding the folder. The knock at the door. The day started like any other. The house still smelled faintly of the cedar polish my grandfather used religiously, and sunlight poured through the kitchen window, hitting the old oak table where he'd once read the morning paper. But that peace shattered with the sound of car doors slamming outside. I stepped to the window and watched as my brother Derek strutted up the driveway, flanked by Mom. Behind them, 2 movers lugged empty boxes, grinning like they'd already claimed the place. When I opened the door, Derek's smile was razor sharp. "Well, little brother," he said, waving a folder, "I hate to break it to you, but this place isn't yours anymore. Mom and I had the deed signed into my name. You're out by Friday." Mom crossed her arms smug. "You should have seen this coming. You never did anything for this family. Derek's the one who deserves it." The movers exchanged looks, already eyeing the furniture like scavengers circling a carcass. But I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I just let a slow smile spread across my face. "You really think I'd let that happen?" For the first time, Derek's smirk faltered. "What the hell does that mean?" I stepped aside, revealing the figure already waiting on the porch. A tall man in a charcoal suit holding a thick folder against his chest. His badge gleamed in the sunlight, unmistakable. Derek froze. Mom's smile collapsed because the man holding the folder wasn't just anyone. He was the trustee of the estate and the only person who knew the truth about what I'd done with my inheritance. The trust unveiled. The man in the suit stepped forward, adjusting his tie with deliberate calm. "Good morning. My name is Robert Clean. I'm the trustee for this estate." Derek's jaw tightened. "Trustee? What are you talking about? The deed is in my name now, signed and stamped. We've already taken care of it." Robert gave a small, almost pitying smile. "Then you've made a very costly mistake. You see, this estate hasn't belonged to either of you since the day your father's will was executed. The deed was transferred into a private trust. And as trustee, I'm here to enforce the terms of that trust." Mom frowned, her smugness cracking. "What terms?" I finally spoke, my voice steady. "The terms that you never bothered to read because you were too busy celebrating Derek's so-called win. The trust isn't just holding the house. It's holding all the estate's assets. And according to Grandpa's wishes, any attempt to fraudulently claim ownership immediately triggers forfeit." Robert opened the folder, pulling out the signed documents and stamped court approvals, "which means," he continued, "that this property and all attached assets are now legally frozen. No sale, no transfer, and absolutely no occupation by unauthorized parties." The movers, sensing the shift, set their boxes down and started edging back toward their truck. Derek's face went red. "This is ridiculous. You can't just—" "Yes, we can," Robert interrupted firmly. "In fact, I've already contacted law enforcement. You'll be explaining to them why you attempted to forge ownership over a trust property." Mom's knees seemed to give out slightly. You set this up? You knew we'd try something like this?" I looked her in the eye. "I didn't know. I counted on it." Her expression collapsed. Derek cursed under his breath, and for the first time in years, I felt the power shift firmly into my hands. The desperate bluff. Derek's voice cracked with panic. "This can't be happening." I signed the papers. "The notary," he stamped it. "That means it's valid." Robert shook his head calmly. "The notary stamp doesn't override the law. You attempted to transfer a property that was never legally yours to begin with. That's forgery at best, fraud at worst. Either way, you're facing criminal charges." The color drained from Mom's face. "But this was supposed to secure our future. You don't understand. We need this house." I finally let out a bitter laugh. "You needed me too, remember? But when I wanted your support, you and Derek mocked me, treated me like an outsider in my own family. You called me weak. You told me I'd never be smart enough to manage Grandpa's legacy." Mom's lips trembled, but she had no defense. Robert handed me the folder. "Everything is in motion. By tomorrow, the sheriff will serve official notices. They'll have no access to this property or any asset tied to the trust." Derek stepped closer, his eyes blazing. "You think this makes you the winner? This isn't over. I'll fight you in court. I'll drag this out until what?" I cut in sharply. "Until you bankrupt yourself with legal fees. Until the press finds out you tried to con your own family out of a fortune. Go ahead, fight. I already have the law and the truth on my side." He froze. For the first time I saw it, the realization that his bluff had failed, that he was out of moves. The movers, tired of the spectacle, began hauling their empty hands back to the truck. Derek looked like he wanted to scream, but Mom sank into the porch chair, hollow-eyed, whispering, "What have we done?" I stood tall in the doorway, holding the folder like a weapon. "Exactly what I expected you to. And now you'll pay for it. The courtroom reckoning. 2 weeks later, we were standing in family court. The courtroom buzzed with reporters thanks to the public filings Robert had strategically allowed to leak. Greedy siblings fighting over a $900,000 estate was the kind of scandal the press devoured. Derek strutted in with a cheap lawyer he could barely afford. Mom clutching his arm like a lifeline. Across the aisle, Robert sat beside me, calm and immovable, his leather briefcase resting on the table like a silent warning. The judge adjusted her glasses. We're here regarding the estate of Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. Petitioners claim rightful transfer of the estate to Derek Johnson. Robert rose. Your Honor, before we begin, I'd like to introduce Exhibit A. He opened the folder and slid forward the trust documents. The irrevocable trust signed and notarized 5 years ago by my client's grandparents, placing all assets into protection under his sole authority. This document predates any so-called transfer attempted by the petitioners. The judge scanned the papers, her brow furrowing. If valid, this makes any attempted transfer null and void. Derek's lawyer jumped up. Your Honor, my client believed he had full authority after his mother's assurance. Robert cut him off, voice sharp. Belief is not law. Fraud is not authority. And coercion, dragging my client from his home by force, is not only illegal, it's criminal. The courtroom gasped. Robert tapped the folder again. We also submit security footage and medical reports from that night showing my client was assaulted. Charges have already been filed. Mom covered her face. Derek stammered. No, this can't. The judge banged her gavel. Order. Based on these documents, the trust is valid. The petitioners had no claim to the estate, and their actions border on criminal fraud. This court awards full recognition of ownership to the respondent. Furthermore, I recommend the district attorney review charges of assault and attempted fraud. The words landed like thunder. Derek's mouth fell open, his bravado gone. Mom wept into her hands. Robert leaned back, satisfied. Told you, he murmured to me. I glanced at Derek and Mom. They looked so small now, their empire of arrogance crumbling under the weight of reality. And I realized something. This wasn't just about the house. It was about dignity, about showing them that betrayal always comes with a price. The collapse, the court ruling was just the opening shot. What followed over the next few weeks was nothing short of demolition, and it wasn't me swinging the hammer. First, Derek's job. His employer didn't take kindly to the headlines. Man accused of assault in family estate fraud case. HR called it conduct unbecoming, and within days he was fired. The smug grin he wore when he threw me out of my own house was gone, replaced by panic as bills started stacking up. Next came Mom. She'd always been the center of her social circle, the one who bragged about her son's business sense and her daughter-in-law's supposed failures. But when the truth spilled out, that she'd tried to help Derek steal from me, friends stopped answering her calls, invitations dried up. At church, whispers followed her down the aisle. For the first time in her life, she had no audience. And then came the final unexpected blow. Robert called one morning with a smile in his voice. Remember how they bragged about refinancing the house in Derek's name? Turns out the bank flagged the fraud. Not only was the loan reversed, but their credit is tanked. They can't even rent without a cosigner now. By the end of the month, they weren't living in the mansion they dreamed of. They were in a one-bedroom apartment on the rough side of town, bickering loudly enough for the neighbors to complain. Meanwhile, I stood on the porch of the estate, my estate, watching the sunset over the fields my grandparents had worked so hard to preserve. It wasn't about the money. It was about honor, family, and the quiet satisfaction of keeping what was rightfully mine. The phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Derek. Please help us. We have nowhere else to go. I didn't reply because sometimes revenge isn't a scream or a punch or a headline. Sometimes it's silence. Letting the people who betrayed you drown in the consequences they built with their own hands. Epilogue. The legacy. A few weeks after Derek and Mom vanished into obscurity, I found myself sitting alone in the study of the estate. The same oak desk where Grandpa used to pore over ledgers now held the trust papers, documents that had saved everything. I reached into the bottom drawer and pulled out a small faded notebook. Grandpa's handwriting covered the pages in his careful scroll. On the first page, he had written, "This land doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to every sacrifice our family made to keep it alive. Protect it, even from your own blood, if you must." For years, I never understood why he'd worded it that way. Now, it made perfect sense. He'd seen what greed could do, and he'd trusted me to hold the line when the day came. Out on the porch, my daughter ran across the grass with the dog, her laughter carrying through the air. Watching her, I realized revenge hadn't just been about punishing Derek or shutting out Mom. It was about making sure that when my daughter grew up, she'd inherit not bitterness, but strength. That night, I poured a glass of whiskey, lifted it toward the stars, and whispered, "It's safe, Grandpa. They'll never touch it again." And in the silence that followed, I could almost swear I heard him laughing. The deep, Proud laugh of a man whose legacy had survived betrayal. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Or should the storm have raged harder? Drop your verdict below. I read every single one. Hit like if you crave justice and share this story with someone who needs its fire. Subscribe to Daily Scroll Stories because here betrayals don't sleep. They hunt their owners. Every shadow hides a reckoning. Every mask breaks and every betrayal is answered. Stay sharp. Stay unbroken. Stay tuned.